Welcome to Innovation in Government, presented by Carahsoft. This program's from TechNet Augusta in Augusta, Georgia. I'm your host, Francis Rose. The Army's new electromagnetic warfare strategy calls on the service to develop EW as, quote, a core competency. The Army says an implementation plan for the strategy is right around the corner. Over the next hour, you'll meet senior Army leaders and some of the leading voices in the private sector that are working together to build the next generation of capabilities for America's defense. They'll tell you what's ahead for some of the most pressing challenges facing warfighters, securing artificial intelligence and the electromagnetic spectrum, delivering trusted data at the edge, and making non-kinetic effects as reliable as kinetic ones. First, a look at how warfighters can deploy artificial intelligence effectively and responsibly. Dave May is Senior Cyber Intelligence Advisor at the U.S. Army Cyber Center of Excellence and Army Training and Doctrine Command. And CW5 Travis Eason is Senior Technology Advisor G39 at Army Cyber Command. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me today. Dave, I start with you. What are we learning in Ukraine that is applicable to the work that the United States is doing and that you and your team are doing in particular about electromagnetics?
Great question. So we're learning quite a bit, actually. We've recognized that electromagnetic warfare is becoming a predominant factor on today's battlefield. It is successfully degrading precision-guided munitions. It is successfully targeting military assets. It is disrupting reliable communications and radars. We're seeing the proliferation and growth of what I would refer to as low-cost, mass-produced EW equipment in Gaza, things like GPS jamming systems. In fact, I would argue that the successful incursion by the Ukrainians into the Kursk Oblast region in August of 2024 is primarily due to two factors: drones and electromagnetic warfare.
Mm-hmm. What can we take away from that as far as what tactically the Army as a whole and you and your team in particular need to do, Travis?
So when we look at Ukraine, we see a lot of speed in the EMS. A lot of change happens rapidly. So one of the primary factors that we have to do is reprogram our systems across the entire Army and hopefully have some interoperability across DoD systems. When you see change like within weeks, not months or years, it takes a big shift in the way that we look at the environment.
I think that of all the things that you said there, as an outsider looking in, thinking about this from a joint perspective may be one of the most challenging things, because I imagine the other services have their units like yours that are looking at this. What's that cross-service collaboration look like?
Right.
In your view?
So if we look at what's happened in the past, we talk about data centricity a lot. Really, that's a key factor in success in the EMS. We have a lot of data that's raw, a lot that's refined. What we really need to do is share that data at the right time and place and have refined data that gets after targeting and things that are important, so we don't have cognitive overload on decision makers and targeting processes. Really, it comes down to lethality of our systems.
Dave, the data issue is one that everybody is wrestling with, working through, trying to figure out. What are the most important pieces of that in the work that you're trying to do? Is it just how the data moves through the system, who has access to it, security of it, all of that? Something else that I missed?
Well, it's all of those and above. So as Travis said, we have to be able to rapidly reprogram our systems. And what we mean by that is really updating our software, our data, and our algorithms that govern how our systems operate in the EMS. And that can be anything from tweaking sensors so they properly analyze and characterize the signal of interest, to fine-tuning our electromagnetic countermeasures so they're more effective against the adversary. And it all starts with the data. So we have adopted what we refer to as a platform agnostic approach. We want to create software that operates across disparate platforms. It's very different from how the Navy and the Air Force approach today. And that has to start with understanding the common data standards for both sensing and effecting.
Mm-hmm. Are those standards established, or are those standards that you're in the process of developing? What's that trajectory look like?
Well, that's interesting. So we are in the process of participating in what we call the RF, or radio frequency data pilot. It's an R-Cyber-led effort. And one of the main objectives is to identify the common standards associated with sensors and effectors. And we have identified, there are quite a few out there, the different standards. What we really need to do next is to make recommendations as what the Army MIL standards should be, so that industry partners can use those standards when they produce their new solutions for us.
You have both talked about the ability to get data where it needs to go, and you've both talked about modernization and so on. Are the techniques to do that in the EMS landscape similar to, different from other aspects of modernization that the Army's undertaking?
Yeah, so I'll take part of this. I think our Signal Corps really is the lead on sharing data. You know, they're the providers of comms and data links and things like that. So really EMS data is no different than comms data or other information that has to flow across the battlefield. The real challenge here is the volume that we're going to see. If we take raw IQ files from across the electromagnetic spectrum, that's literally like the ones and zeros coming off of the different signals that we're seeing. That's going to overload any network, knowing that we have, you know, finite bandwidths and limited time to do data transfers. That's why in the previous question I mentioned refined data. We have to have enough compute and storage on the front edge to narrow down to where it's perhaps just textual data that's going back and forth, and limiting those big files that we need to send periodically.
Travis mentioned edge computing, Dave. How does that evolution, that transformation really, not just in the Army, but all across the military, how does that inform the way that you're thinking about EMS and the way that you're going to do this work moving forward?
Yeah, the whole issue about data standards and edge computing, in my mind, segues directly into artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we believe that artificial intelligence is going to have a huge benefit to reprogramming in the future. It's going to do several things for us. First of all, it's going to reduce or accelerate our reprogramming cycles. So instead of something taking weeks, it might take just days or hours. It's also going to help us enhance our sensing capability. So it should do automatic characterization of a signal, auto-identification. So that is a target tracking radar, or that is a frequency hopping radio. It will do anomaly detection. So as we are going through the EMS and we find a signal that doesn't look just right, it's going to raise a red flag and say, hey, this signal parameter is off. Either our sensor is not working properly, or perhaps the adversary has adapted and we have to change. And then it should also be able to offer reprogramming options for us. So based off of a modification that the adversary has made, we need to make a tweak here, and that will be automatic. Now, there are some challenges with AI. So first of all, you need a very large amount of quality data to train these models. Secondly, there's just an issue of trust. So AI has a propensity to hallucinate, and it's going to take some sets and reps before our soldiers and our commanders trust these systems. And then lastly, just I would say talent acquisition. So we have to be able to retain and attract quality folks that can both reprogram systems and work with AI. And those are high demand, low density folks.
Colonel John Agnello, commander of the 2nd Theater Information Advantage Detachment. Colonel, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate your time today. Tell me about the mission of the TIADs.
So the TIAD was designed, the Army decided to stand up 3 organizations, one for the Pacific Theater, one for the European Theater, and one to support Army Cyber. The second TIAD is supporting Army Cyber's mission, and our job is to really understand the information space and to help commanders better understand and make better, faster, more informed decisions in the information space. The Army is always looking towards executing missions throughout the competition continuum. And one of the big things that we continue to look at is in the information space. It really starts across the competition continuum. But when we talk competition, crisis, and conflict, the idea is information really surpasses individuals if it comes to when we're actually in conflict, but our adversaries are always fighting in the information space. So we are really the first organization the Army decided to stand up to go directly on the information space and bring together all the different aspects of information, from cyber and electronic warfare to information operations to psychological operations to civil affairs and to public affairs. The idea is, by bringing all these together, we can converge forces and to support commanders' objectives and truly get after what's going on in the information.
You use 3 C's there. I love the alliteration: competition, crisis, and conflict. Is that the kind of the crux on that you base your tactical operations around?
Yeah, so the operational environment designed in, the Army looks at it as that there's 3 dimensions to the operational environment. There's the human, the physical, and the information dimension. Those three dimensions make up the operational environment, and the Army executes those operations through the competition continuum. So competition, looking at, what is there up to armed conflict, crisis being when something could start being small conflicts here and there, and raising all the way up to actual conflict when we're into large scale combat operations. The TIAD really is one of those organizations that looks across all of that, sometimes focusing in the competition continuum and focusing in the competition space a lot of times, but we definitely have mission that follows all the way through the entire continuum.
You've done some exercises and experimentation. What have you learned from that, and how does it apply not just to the work that you're doing, but with the units that you're integrated with?
So over the last few years, the Army executed what's called a campaign of learning. And that part of campaign of learning was we stood up a TIAD out in the Pacific Theater, working with the Indo-PACOM and USERPAC G39 and the USERPAC staff. And the idea of that was to focus on what would a TIAD do to support the USERPAC commander. And we definitely pulled some lessons learned from that on what the structure looks like, what we would want to incorporate in there, what type of missions they could have, what technologies they need. And then moving forward into the next year, we went over into the European theater, working with the Avenger Triad 24. And then we stood up a TIAD out in USER-EURAF, supporting the USER-EURAF commander, supporting the 56 artillery commander. Now it's the multi-domain command. The idea was, how can we bring together these different effects and converge them into the battle space to actually really get after what the commander is looking for. With those, we truly did better understand what's the mission look like. What's the composition of the organization? Do we need different skill sets? What technologies we need? We learned a lot about the technologies we actually need. Those technologies really help us better visualize the information space, get after the information space. How can we actually gather the information that's out there, analyze it, produce it, and actually put it up into a help the commander better understand it? How can we show it? How do you visualize information? I think that's one of the hardest things that we have out there, is truly trying to get after what does it look like. People think about what this information space looks like, and they say, well, it's really just social media. What's in social media? We're chasing Twitters. We're chasing Twitter. Chasing Twitter feeds and such. Mm-hmm. It's much more than that. The information space really is, what does a person on the ground need? What do they want? What are they saying? It's not just what's in social media. Mm-hmm. It's, you put a civil affairs officer on the ground that can understand, what do you need when it comes to water, power, sewage? You have psychological operations soldiers on the ground that can better understand, how do you influence a population to go in a direction? You have public affairs individuals that are out there that are to inform people. They inform domestic audiences, they inform foreign audiences. And then we have cyber officers and cyber soldiers and electronic warfare that really are looking at that. How do we execute cyber operations in this type of space? All of that really gets after what we're looking for.
What were some of the differences in the lessons that you learned from the European exercises versus the PACOM exercises?
Oh, so it's really interesting, because the Pacific Theater and the European Theater are vastly different. really the Pacific Theater is our focus in a lot of cases. Now, I will tell you that the our cyber triad a little bit different because we're actually looking trans-regionally and globally. The idea of that is really, when we've got the European theater and the Pacific theater, and those triads are focused and actually providing support to those theater commanders, our cyber triad is really looking trans-regionally and how can we help understand the cyberspace, and then also how can we support either theater, but also at the same time, we may need to be doing something and maybe do something different merely because we're not focused at one or the other. But I will tell you some of the things we did learn is that definitely the structure the structure of the skill sets, I think we definitely know what skill sets we need. I think we've got a pretty good understanding of what technologies we need. I will say that because the theaters are vastly different, where the triad executes missions and how they execute missions is a little bit different. I'd say that the mission sets that a triad can do are very much like the Chinese food menu. You've got everything from executing cyberspace operations to doing target analysis of different audiences, to actually distributing pamphlets or just doing social media tweets. All of those are vastly different, but I will tell you that in the Pacific Theater, because of the tyranny of distance, they call it, from where the island chains are, having someone on the ground in the theater doing something in one of the allied nation there is key. When in the European theater, a lot of times it's working much more with partners and allies because of the way the theater is actually laid out, and it's more of a land terrain versus a sea terrain.
Colonel, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today. Colonel Scott Schaefer of PEO IEW&S, welcome. It's great to see you. Thank you for joining me. Congratulations on your new role. What's your mission in that job?
Well, Francis, I appreciate it. It's great to be here. I'm not a stranger to the PEO, though it's been a few years, but I'm really happy to be back. So my role here is the project manager for electronic warfare and cyber. Some of my goals coming into the new role is very focused on how do we maintain electromagnetic spectrum superiority for the Army. That's probably the top thing. Secondly, I want to do things a little faster. So how do we get kit? How do we get capability out to the field much quicker than we have in the past? And that kind of challenges the way we've done things from a ground up development with a lot of products. So now we're leaning forward to more of industry and what commercial systems are out there and how can we integrate those together more quickly. And then prototype, go to experiments, go to exercises, go to capstone events. And if the system works the way it's initially designed to do it, start fielding. Let's move quick.
Yeah. What will drive that speed, do you think? Not just what you can do, but what industry can do, what your customers in the field can do, all of that. What do you think will drive that speed?
So in this world, I think teamwork is really important. And so you mentioned, the government, my office, you've mentioned industry, and then also the requirements and resourcing community. So all of us has got to play together and be on the same page. And I think the way things are going right now, we are. And people are starting to understand that things are changing, we're moving faster. And so what helps me go faster is these transformation and contact units, exercises such as project convergence, like capstone exercises, all those iterations that are kind of scheduled throughout the years that give me opportunities to take kit to the field really fast. And then I get soldiers to tell me like, hey, this works well. Or the second thing they may say is, oh, I don't like this. Can you make this change?
Yeah.
And then the other one that always comes up a lot is training. So when you field new kit, you've got to give them some kind of understanding of how to use it and how to employ it operationally. And a little bit's of buttonology, like what do I push to do what, but really the concepts of how do you employ it and how does it make your job easier and better. And so that loop of interactions with soldiers, getting their feedback, and then just simple observations on our part too, helps us to refine capability and make it better.
You mentioned requirements. How has the push to look for commercial solutions informed the way that you think about requirements?
Ooh, so we've got to be flexible. We come with with an early set of requirements up front. It kind of gives me a little guidance. We I call it soft guidance. So it kind of gives you a bearing of which way to go. And then when we do these experiments and assessments, we actually do have an ability to go back and update the requirements. So a lot of it could be changes could be based on can technology do this today? Because if it can't, then maybe we push that off for the future. And then we may learn new capability that we didn't know existed. So sometimes we also don't know what we don't know. And I think that's where we have a lot of flexibility.
What is the best thing that you think you can do and the best thing that you think industry can do to introduce more flexibility into the system, especially as far as requirements go, but not exclusively requirements?
So on my side, there's a couple of things that I would like to leverage more so in the future. So other transaction authorities, that gives us a little more flexibility in contracting. So where do we need to go? What parts of the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation, would apply? What parts we don't think are things that may slow us down a little bit. And then there's also this other thing called agile funding, where it gives us a little more flexibility as well. So I keep using the flexibility term, but it allows me to do early prototyping work. So kind of buy stuff, get it out to the field, and then in that same breath, I can actually make changes to the software, maybe make size, weight, and power swaps, if you will, and then also get after different threats that may be out there that we weren't aware of before.
A couple of training questions too. I imagine the technology that you're training on is changing, and the technology and techniques for delivering the training to the soldier are changing too. How so, if so, and how is that informing the way that you're going about your work?
So training, that really important, because if you don't, so a perfect example, if you don't know how to use your iPhone, it's not really useful to you, right? So we've got to do a really good job of getting training out in a package early that has, I like to say it, more pictures, because we're starting to learn that soldiers are more visual learners. And then also, when you do take it out there, you want to create an environment, a learning and a training environment that's both virtual, but also constructive, and you can take it out to the kind of the operational field, so they can actually kind of push and make mistakes in the classroom, but also go out and really actually push the buttons and see how the system works on the battlefield. Because when you get out, when you get out to the field, there's things such as foliage and over the horizon that are factors you don't see in a classroom, and that really changes your understanding of how the kit's supposed to be used, and then where you may position yourself to get a better signal.
What are the tactics that you're using to get to prototyping and then get from prototyping to production?
So tactics, I think I alluded to it a little bit. It's really focused on just moving. So we try to kind of pave the path early. I say, this is our intent, is to prototype and go to TIC units. A perfect example is a Spectrum Situational Awareness System. That is one of our systems that we're developing that gets after a part of the concept of EW that we haven't really thought much about. And so that's the see yourself. What is your unit, what does your command post look like in the spectrum, and how big of a signature are you creating? And so we were able to do an assessment just a few months ago in June with a few different units, 25th ID, 101st, in SOCOM. We had soldiers from all those different units there helping us determine, is this the right system, and is it going to meet all the capabilities we need? So that turn from a contract award just earlier in the same year to an assessment, and now we're going to start fielding, like that's just leaps and bounds ahead when it comes to speed. And that's kind of the iteration we're doing. And so we're kind of posturing everything. We've got to posture the requirements to align with that, and then take a bit of, I wouldn't say risk is probably not the right word, but lean forward on the funding and the confidence that we're going to be successful, and so that the funding is already postured to go into production and right after that.
So it sounds like there's a best practices chain there, and that each of these is not a one-off because of the uniqueness of the technology or the uniqueness of the mission delivery or whatever. Is that a fair?
I agree. I think best practices, in a ways, this may become normal, a normal business, I think.
What do you think has to happen for that to happen? That's a cultural change, it strikes me. And that tends to be a little more difficult in the department than the tactical or strategic change.
Yeah, I think we're there. I think the Army is heading in the right direction, and I think the culture is there to support this.
Steve Jacyna, Director of Cyber at Carahsoft. Steve, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Kick things off, AI, ML, obviously playing a growing, ever-present role, both in cybersecurity, decision-making, certainly other areas. Talk about the defense part of government in particular. We're looking for responsible, secure deployment. How do organizations start to execute in that fashion?
Yeah, I think there's three main focus points around that. The first would be around the cybersecurity aspect, right? Specifically, the identity piece, right? I think the identity piece ends up being sort of the focal point for this when you think about AI and making sure that a gentle AI, right, is sort of tracked the same way an employee is tracked within an organization. So making sure that there's strict policy control on authentication, so how it enters a network, what it has access to once it's in that network, right? And then thinking about maybe some of the privileged privileged access management components of that, right? Especially as sensitive information is sort of included, right? So I think that's a big piece, and if you look at identity, that ends up being sort of the first and key pillar of a zero trust strategy. So figuring out how you can incorporate zero trust into the management of AI is hugely important. And then the second piece, I would say, is the human aspect of it, right? Like making sure that there's always a human being behind all major decision making, right? Like I think AI is extremely helpful in many ways, both on a cybersecurity standpoint and in other ways around like automation. But making sure that that automation doesn't replace human decision making is key, right? And almost think about it like this: it's like making sure that there's an adult in the room, right, at all times. And then the third piece, I would say, is the ethical strategies and principles around AI. So making sure that there's strict policies in place that manage the law, so the law is not being broken, and that the AI is acting in a responsible way, especially as it pertains to access to military gear or weaponry, advanced weaponry, right? Like knowing how that AI is going to interact with that and making sure that there's policies in place to make sure that it responds ethically, right? I think are going to be probably the big components here.
In all of those areas that you tease out, the identity piece tied to zero trust, human aspect, the responsible ethical use of artificial intelligence and machine learning, workforce is a massive component. Retention, keeping those folks really engaged, moving toward a common goal. What needs to happen relative to workforce so that those organizations can position themselves well for future operations?
Absolutely. So the first starts with the EDU space, especially higher education. So making sure that cybersecurity in particular is bolstered within the university level, so that there's a high level of awareness that these cybersecurity roles and positions and careers are available, right? And then adding to that is making sure that university curriculum has the right, certifications in place, so that when somebody comes out of the university, hey, they're ready for a role in the DoD space, right off the bat.
Vaughn Gardner is Director of DoD and Distinguished Technologist for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, HPE. Vaughn, thanks for joining me today. You mentioned a moment ago that you're hearing lots of discussion on the floor about multi-domain operations. What do you think is driving that?
I think a lot of things are driving it. World climate, right now is huge. I think what we're seeing across the board is a migration to the edge, leveraging AI for all the right reasons. And I think, so for MDO itself, I think there are a couple of big gaps. One particular that DoD and industry really need to partner together on to help solve. And I think for me, it's really trying to, there's a big seam that needs to be integrated when it comes to data, effects, and decision making. And it needs to be across all these domains. So air, land, sea, space, cyberspace. And when you start dealing with coalition environments, just further complicates things a little bit. But I think, to me, that's one of the big things that we've got to solve for. And I hear a lot of buzz about that on the floor.
What are the solutions that the Army and the other services are looking for, and what's available to them to try to reinforce that seam?
Okay, well, I would tell you, I don't think we need to replace a lot of compute or anything like that. I think some of it's policy, some of it's technology, it always is. But in this case, I think it's the DoD partnering with industry, again, to figure out how to close the gap. And it starts with trusted data, trusted sources, and full integration. So the ability to deliver the data and the information to the decision makers in a timely fashion so we can outpace our adversaries. I think time and trust are going to be two ingredients for any MDO operation moving forward, and they're going to be the key to victory at the end of the day.
Is DoD getting better at getting that information to industry in your view? Are they being more open about telling you what they need instead of what they have to have through a list of requirements?
Francis, I tell you, that's kind of a double-edged sword. In some cases, yes. They know what they want, but they haven't got it yet. I think they have a sense of a capability, a capacity that they need, they desire to help speed their decision-making processes so they can outpace our adversaries. But a lot of times it's not until they see it, touch it, feel it, use it, do they actually understand what the capability is. A prime example of that for me is artificial intelligence. So using AI to augment and support decision-making, sift through mountains of data, sensor data, information, you name it, whether it's ELINT, SIGINT, you name the source. But being able to sift through that in short order and come up with something that is actionable, that you can give to a decision maker, and then getting that information to a trigger puller, whether that's an air breather or on the ground, or you have it in a timely fashion, is what it's all about.
It strikes me that that could be simultaneously a lot more challenging than fulfilling requirements, but also a lot more liberating than fulfilling requirements.
I think it absolutely is. And I think one of the keys to that aspect of it is that industry needs to come to this with a little bit of a fresh perspective. There's been a lot of industry partners that have come to the fight, and they have a lot of proprietary capabilities. That does not lend itself to MDO. We've all lived this, I think, or seen this to some extent, where the different service components, whether it's air, land, space, cyberspace, operate in silos, and there's not a lot of good integration across. There's not a lot of open standards that are enforced. So having open systems that are trusted from the foundation up, so the compute, the transport, everything, to have it as open standards based on openness so it can be shareable and trusted, though, is absolutely critical. I think that's the foundational piece to all of it.
The wrinkle, I guess, going in that direction too, is that every person that I speak to in uniform, whether it's here or at some other event, mentions very quickly in an MDO environment, especially, allies and partners. And you've got then a whole nother layer of different standards and so on, complexity that you add to that mix, I suppose.
You do, absolutely. And when you deal with open standards, it makes it so much easier for everybody to move forward with pace and with purpose. So especially when you get into coalition, data sharing, being able to share and trust the data you're sharing for decision makers is absolutely critical. So I go back to the two foundational decision pieces for MDO. It's really speed and trust. If you can get the stuff there fast, that's great. But if it's not trusted, it's not helpful. If you can get it there and it's trusted and you can get it there fast, that's a win for everybody.
Speaking of getting it there, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned the migration to the edge, and that's another issue that everybody in uniform that I talk to is talking about, especially establishing points at the edge where information and data can go from one to the other without having to come back to home base. What's the implication of that for the way that organizations think about all of these issues?
Oh, Francis, that is, to me, that is one of the biggest things. And that it comes down to operating in a DDIL or a contested environment, for sure. Our troops need to be able to operate, sustain, and execute in a disconnected fashion or disrupted fashion. The enemy gets a vote, Mother Nature gets a vote. So whether it's jamming or it's the weather or whatever else is going to stand in our way of executing the mission, the ability to be able to execute, operate through those periods of contestedness at the edge is what it's all about. There's going to be a lot of times when you don't have connectivity back with the echelons behind, and you're not going to get the decision from MAR4 PAC or the J6 or whoever it's going to be, the J3, the commander in the theater. You're going to be disconnected, and you're going to have to be able to figure out what you're going to do on your own with the information and the ability to execute and operate there when you're on your own, alone and afraid, disconnected until you can get reconnected. But the ability to process and have AI aided for decision making and those things of that nature at the edge are going to be absolutely crucial.
Tom Stockmeyer is Managing Director for Government Critical Infrastructure at Cyware. Welcome, it's great to see you. How are you seeing artificial intelligence, large language models, and so on informing the way that the Army and the other services are going about modernizing tasks that they've been doing for a long time?
Well, that's a big question, right? So I'll just start with the premise that we're just at the early stages of AI, if you will. AI is going to become really important for how we project power, right, forward, as well as how we defend the homeland, right, going forward. I'll start with that. And then I'll just touch on what I think this thing called innovation. I think the U.S. won the, we won the industrial age. We won the internet age, if you will, and now we're in the AI age. And I think from a security perspective and scaling up and doing it safely, I think we have to keep government regulation to a minimum. I think there's no better people at innovating than the block of American people, if you will. And I think in order for us to win this AI race, right, which is real important, we have to let the American people innovate to get us there. So let's just, start with that.
Mm-hmm. What does winning look like in your view in a time frame of 10 years, 25 years, whatever?
That is a really good question. So first of all, I think that's unimaginable almost. We're at the beginning stages. Where we'll be 10 years or 15 or 25 years it's kind of hard to know. We've all seen a lot of sci-fi movies and you can guess and dream, but I would say if you think about military, right, Department of Defense, you kind of break it into two groups, offensive capability and defensive capability. If you just start with offensive, and there's obviously not a lot I can talk about, and AI is not new to DoD. They certainly know how to deploy it securely and use it. I think if you can automate your offensive capabilities against that other nation's critical infrastructure or military might, right, you're going to win if you have the upper hand there. If you can't leverage automation and AI to do that, you're probably not going to win, right? And so that offensive capability is paramount. Let's just park that aside. If you look at like the defensive component and you start small, relative to Department of Defense is very similar to like industry. Everybody has like, for example, starting small, a level 1 security operations center. They all have the same challenges, right? Lack of skilled resources or a lot of turnover. Inconsistent outcomes, because you could have somebody who's been there 10 years and generates an outcome versus somebody who's new or just came out of school. Their outcome of their product for the day may look a little bit different, not as thorough. You have siloed teams and siloed tools, and you're too slow to take action. I think the DoD is already using AI in these cases to overcome these challenges. I think industry is pretty far along. And a couple of months ago, I participated in a one-day workshop with state and local governments. You'd be surprised how far along local governments are in using AI. There was a small 100,000 citizen county that's using AI to do property tax adjudication and appeals for their citizens. And I was like, what? How is that even possible? So there's a lot that goes into it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I answered the early stage. The late stage is, if you just bear with me for one second, I love this term collective defense. I think that is where things are headed. I think we've tried to do that with applications, with systems, with manual data, with machine data. But imagine a day, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, where AI can take control of different weapons platforms and have the right weapons platform mitigate the threat or knock down the attack in the right application in the right time frame and do that automatically versus some joint operations and people on the phone looking at monitors and trying to do that manually. That is a big deal. I don't think we're there today, but I think that's what the future will look like. It's a little bit scary, but that's what it will look like. Imagine if we could do the same thing for our critical infrastructure. There's this thing called the Holy Trinity with military mobility. And if we could protect rail, aviation, and maritime that the military depends on industry in order to mobilize, as well as water and electric and all that stuff, right? And then think about the 6 military branches, and they each have weapons platforms, right? And if AI could be a layer on top that manages those different weapons platforms, takes command and control at the right times, what you could do with that. So I call all that collective defense. And I think that's the future. I don't think we're there today, but I can't even project past that, right?
Tom Afferton's president of the cyber mission sector at Peraton. Welcome. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
A lot of discussion here about multi-domain operations. What do you see as the gaps in not just the Army's efforts, but the military's efforts more broadly to do that? And what are they coming to you and asking you about to try to help close those gaps?
Yeah, I think in the context of this conference, we're really focused on non-kinetic effects and specifically cyber, electronic warfare, and information operations. And I think General Barrett said it well last night in her keynote that this is about bringing non-kinetic effects up to the level of reliability and predictability that commanders have in kinetic effects. A commander wants to be able to dictate, I want that effect to have that impact at that destination at that point in time, and have the outcomes be as predictable as a kinetic effect. I think to do that, one of the things we absolutely need to enable is that connective tissue of data, between those 3 different areas, right? As well as across security levels with cross-domain solutions. Thinking about those 3 areas, though, I think one of the underserved areas is information operations. I was at a conference earlier this year, Admiral Paparo from Indo-PACOM. He said that one of his threats that he's most concerned about is influence operations by our adversaries. Peraton's done some of its own research, and we think we're outgunned in the information domain at least 10 to 1. Now, the good news is that the defense industrial base has all the capabilities to not only catch up, but to get ahead of our adversaries in the information space. We've been developing AI-enabled tools that allow our analysts to quickly understand what's going on in the information environment, to be able to develop detailed target audience analysis, build a campaign, deliver the effects, even in a contested environment, and then most importantly, assess that effect had the desired outcome that the commander was looking for. So I think there is a way to close that gap.
You mentioned the connective tissue among each of those three areas that you described. Is that a technological issue? Is that a cultural issue? Is that a policy issue? Something else?
Well, I think it's a little bit of all of the above. We bring some experience from modernizing all of the data management solutions for the signals intelligence enterprise, which is a massive scale. And what we have found is one of the critical elements is kind of data provenance. Understanding where your data comes from, how it is generated, who is touching it, who is changing it. And then also thinking about how does that apply when you move out to the tactical edge. Everything that this conference we've talked about is getting capabilities in the warfighter's hands. And to push that out to the edge, you need to be thinking about what data do they need, the applications, right, compute, storage, bandwidth, being efficient with that, and then how can they operate in a disconnected or degraded environment as well.
And connecting that, I imagine, then in an edge-to-edge environment rather than a hub-spoke type environment also.
Absolutely.
Is there progress that you see in that area?
Yes, in fact, we've been doing some work looking at really the whole stack. You have to think about the compute environment and what you can have available, but then also think about what can you do in that disconnected environment or in an edge-to-edge to be able to still make sense of, for example, the information environment based on the data that you have available to you locally. And then when you have connection back to the core at a later time, that you can kind of catch up and then take advantage of the deeper analytics that are available back at the core.
How complex does that have to be at each of those endpoints or at some place on the edge to be able to deliver the kind of capability that a decision maker will need?
Well, I think one of the things that industry has to do is that, while there may be some complexity there, we have to take that away from the warfighter, right? We need to deliver capabilities that are intuitive, that are really a field first mentality, that they don't have to go through a lot of training. It just makes sense to them. And I think for us, what we've done is to make sure that as we're building capabilities, we are doing so with not only the operator in mind, but involving the operator in that process. Some of our integrated development teams include the operators, or we have our engineers sitting side by side operators with a day of the life, so that what we're delivering is making their job easier, taking complexity out away from them so that they are seeing the efficiency and the effectiveness that they need.
So as an outsider looking in, I would say all of the things that you described seem like a natural fit for artificial intelligence. And I know a lot of people here talking about how to apply AI to whatever it is their mission set is. So what's the connection look like today, and what do you anticipate, if you can, the landscape looks like at some future point soon?
Well, I think with AI, it's difficult to predict the future, but I think that there's a couple of principles involved. And I think it starts with really setting the framework, setting the ground rules up front. Decide what it is that you're trying to use AI. What problem are you going to solve? What data are you going to use to do that? Not only to answer questions in real time, but to train your models. And that goes back to the data provenance that I talked about earlier. You know, we like to think about mission first, but ethics always, right? And so understanding how you're going to apply AI. And then I think another important principle is human-machine teaming, right? This isn't about replacing individuals. It is about making them more effective by having, you know, that wingman there to help answer more complex questions and give suggestions, but then still have that human in the loop to make sure that that answer makes sense. Take time away, you know, give time back to the analysts by taking away those kind of routine tasks so that analysts and operators can focus on their most important missions.
What's the right role, in your view, for industry partners with government to help them understand how to get what you have through the acquisition process, especially with the emphasis now on commercial solutions?
Well, I think it is, I think the cycle has changed, where the expectation is that we are bringing operational capabilities forward. And so it is on us to be developing things with the operator in mind, that we are presenting the bottom line up front, that this is how it's going to save money, this is how it's going to contribute to the mission, as opposed to, this is an exquisite piece of tech, how do you think you could use it? Right. And so I think industry needs to be coming forward with solutions that are already designed with the operator in mind. And I think when we do that, that will align well with the kind of more modern acquisition approach to getting, and again, it's all about getting working capabilities in the hands of our warfighter.
Hansong Bay of Zscaler Government Solutions, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining me today. A lot of discussion here about multi-domain operations. What are the capability gaps that folks from the Army are coming to you and talking to you about?
Yeah, I think the biggest gap is, and the dilemma is, how do you get information out to the tactical edge? The first instinct is do what we've always done, which is get a network out there, get a circuit, get a router, configure it. And that's not going to work anymore because the contingencies change. It's temporal in nature. So by the time you get a circuit out there, it could be over, done with, or somewhere else is the hot spot. So the idea that we can fight a war, and by the way, Napoleon said, you know, the Army travels on its stomach, right? So in the Army, it's always been beans and bullets. Everybody understands beans and bullets, but now it's beans, bullets, and bytes. Bytes is just as important as the beans and bullets. So how do we be agile with that information so that the commanders on the ground, down to the platoon squad level, can get that information? So my proposal would be that the network use any and all network, even adversaries' network. Because in a true zero trust scenario, it's just transport. You don't need a bespoke circuit, mil-spec as they say anymore. Starshield, Starlink, 5G, Starbucks, local deli, local PC rooms, whatever you can get your hands on, it'll be protected. And so use it. And I think that is a fundamental mind shift and transformation that the department finds hard to do.
Why is the department finding that hard to do, and what do you think would facilitate that?
So that is the Newton's first law.
Yeah.
Object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by an external force. I've been building SIPR. I've been building NIPR. I have my network. I feel good about my network. I have my routers, my configuration, my firewalls. So there's a sense of confidence and comfort in doing what, and, you know, truth be told, don't break it if it don't, you know, or don't fix it if it ain't broke, right? And what I'm saying is, even though you can get a circuit out there, even though you can get routers and configure all of that to a router jockey, that's easy to do, but it takes time. And in a contingency, a modern contingency, that's the one commodity you don't have is time. So instead of building networks, deploying networks, start deploying zero trust and make it easy on yourself with a transport. Now, I'm not saying the network is not important. It is, but it's like breathing. When we woke up this morning, we didn't think about breathing. We just do it, right? So it's important. But just like, you know, if we stop breathing, in 90 seconds, we're dead. So I'm not saying network is not important. I'm just saying it's a tool, it's transport, it's commodity. Use it however and whenever without having to deploy a bespoke network.
You talk about speed, and so does every uniformed person that's been with me this week so far. What continues to drive the speed that they want? Your point is correct. They don't have time for deployment, a lot of fooling around. What narrows the time frames that these folks?
Yeah, so I think it's less dependence on equipment for communication. I'm not talking about tactical gear. So imagine if you could just go walk into a store, buy any local 5G, throw it in there, and know that it's secure, right? And you're hiding in plain sight. Those are now a possibility. It's doable. Technology has finally caught up. So now our mindset has to shift to catch up with technology.
I see. You also talked about the computing at the edge and data at the edge. And another concept that pretty much everybody in uniform that I talk to is discussing is expecting that environment will be contested on some level. What's the implication of that for all of the things that you're talking about?
So having local presence, the data local presence, and having the local communication is absolutely critical. One of the things that I think vendors think about is they don't understand what contested means, but also it's the mission dependent. So think about a mission where you communicate, you move, you shoot, and then you communicate. During that time, in the beginning, you communicate because they don't know you're there. At the end, you're communicating because it's over and done with. But in that middle, you cannot have something that the data is not local. It has to reside with the rifleman. It has to reside with the platoon leader, the platoon sergeant, company commander. So that data should be saturated and populated before the mission, be with the soldiers, and then afterwards, as fast as possible, exfil that data out so that the commanders can have common operating picture.
The other advantage that it sounds like the concept that you're discussing would give the services is the next biggest challenge, I guess, that people talk to me about is the challenge of edge to edge data exchange rather than edge to base out to the edge again.
That's right.
And it sounds like that would
Absolutely.
be a solution there.
You know, when we talk about zero trust solutions, it's exactly that, right? Headquarters to soldier and or hub and spoke, as we like to say. But a true zero trust solution follows the soldier and the data, and anything and everything in between is immaterial, right? So in that world, then you're protected. Me talking to you, me talking to the squad leader, the team leader, the company commander, and above. So it's independent of the location, it's independent of the device, and it's certainly independent of the network.
You pointed out before we went on, you talked about the importance of AI and machine learning as an element of this, but it's tempting, I imagine, to say, let's sprinkle some AI on this and make it better, when that may or may not be the case. How do you recommend that folks evaluate where AI, machine learning, and other technologies like that fit into all of these things?
So I'll take a step backward on that conversation. We're quickly getting to a point where AI is scraping AI-generated content. So I call this the Whitaker effect. Why do I call it the Whitaker effect? There's a family in West Virginia, two identical brothers, married, and said, you know what, let's just keep it amongst our circle. Two identical brothers, identical twins, and their children's married. Then their children's married, and within 3 or 4 generations, they had horrific medical conditions. We're getting to a point where, because AI is consuming so much of the generated content and learning from it, we're learning AI-generated content that AI is learning that creates content. It's inbred. So one of the things that my ask of the department is, you need to, and I know data tagging is hard, but this one is not that hard. Every AI-generated content has to have metadata that says, every AI scraper, skip me, because I was generated by AI, right? Otherwise, we're going to quickly find garbage in, garbage out at billionth of a second iteration. It's going to become a huge tsunami of a problem, right? So never mind the technology of AI. My thing is safeguard AI training by tagging it so that other AIs will just skip over and go to human-generated so that it gets better.
Hansong, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. Hansong Bay of Zscaler on innovation in government. Thanks for joining me for this Innovation in Government program presented by Carahsoft. If you missed any part of this program, you can watch the show in its entirety on our website, fedgovtoday.com, or on the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for watching. Good night.